you do all, Tim. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And again, thank you for the help in organizing those mailers to get sent out. Speed up the process and get everybody up and moving, which we're already, so we, as I mentioned, already sent out some for our Ronan rural routes, and we're already getting feedback from people in the community that are getting those mailers and that are already showing interest in what is about to happen. And even one lady called Jordan to let us know that if we wanted to use her 20 acres to put up the tent, that we could, because she saw we didn't have a location at the time. So getting some good results from that already. We're moving into Matthew 27, and we're dealing with the crucifixion of Christ, but not just the crucifixion only, but how that in fact with the crucifixion also establishes the glory of Christ also, and how that was connected in Matthew 16:24 through 27, where Jesus warns his apostles that in fact he will go to Jerusalem, he will be abused of the elders, and that he will die to rise again. But in verse 27, he mentions in that context, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. So that in fact these two things are going hand in hand in establishing all of this process, or all of this plan that God has been forming from the foundations of the world. Matthew 27 begins with the morning following of what has taken place in Matthew 26. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate the governor. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned, and that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple, and departed, and went and hanged himself. And the chief priest took the silver pieces, and said, It is not lawful for to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. And they took counsel, and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord appointed me. Matthew 27:1. Here we have the chief priests, the elders, have gone through an illegal process of trying Jesus, but then they still go through the means of delivering him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. This is an attempt to try and legitimize the illegal actions that are already taken. And thus we have been shown to us. It doesn't matter if you end up trying to do the right thing afterwards. It doesn't cover up what you did before. What you did before was still illegal. And going through this does not change that fact. So for the way that we're making application for this is that we are studying how it is that people are going to respond to sins that they commit. They're going to try to cover it up. They're going to try to hide it. They're going to try to explain it away. They're going to try to find a way to justify it. And that people will oftentimes, well, I only did this because of what you did. That doesn't justify it. Because more than likely, what I did, there's nothing wrong with what I did. You just think that there is, and you're trying to get the light off of you to shine on somebody else. So let's just grant it. Let's say, yeah, if I did do something wrong, that does not cleanse the sin that we're actually talking about. So we can see that with what transpired with me in Virginia. I'm calling out the sins of my dad and my brother, and then they want to try to dig up sins from 10 years ago. Well, Micah did this, and it's just like, so what if he did? That doesn't take attention off of what you did. But that's the game people play. And it's And it really is a denominational tactic we hear it all the time when people will call us and ask us like, well, don't you sin? Well, yeah, of course I sin. But what does that have to do with what we're pointing out? As if the fact that I make mistakes and the fact that I sin then just justifies and allows anything to happen. We can't allow that. So an attempt also is being found in this to not only legitimize what they did, but it's ultimately to try to shift blame. They're not wanting to take responsibility for what they're doing. Get the focus off of them. We're doing what's right. We took this to Pontius Pilate. Now, when you consider all of the faults, all of the sins that are kept up in this fake trial, the first thing being that the verdict was reached before the trial even began. Jesus was guilty and had to prove himself innocent. That's not how the justice system is supposed to operate. Officials had no authority to make an arrest at night unless someone was actually caught in the act of doing some type of wickedness. The judges were not to be part of an arrest. They couldn't be the ones sending them out to make the arrest. Capital trials could not be held at night. A criminal could not be acquitted in one day. A guilty verdict also demanded a night to think about, but all of this is being sped through with their process. Crucifixion was not even a punishment that the Jews were to use, or that they had any legality to use. Their method of punishment was stoning, and the ones that were involved in casting the stones were the ones in bringing the accusation to the guilty party, but they're not wanting to have any of this traced back to them. Hearsay evidence was inadmissible under Hebrew law. Circumstantial evidence was discredited. The Hebrew law was based upon 2 or 3 witnesses. False witnesses were sought to testify against Jesus. The text tells us that very clearly. The youngest members of the Sanhedrin were to vote first, and that's not how this played out. A member of the Sanhedrin was to be assigned to defend the accused, and Jesus had no defense. The Sanhedrin had no authority to originate charges, only to try them. The court sessions were forbidden on feast days and on the eve of Sabbaths. The accused could not testify against himself. In a capital crimes case, the Sanhedrin was to meet only in the hall of hewn stone, but this is taking place in the palace of the chief priest, and a high priest was not allowed or was not admitted to rend his clothes, to tear his clothes, and we find out that actually took place during this very event. And not only will it take place in this event, but later on in the book of Acts, you'll see it happen again. So all of that sin that's transpired, these individuals, they're supposed to be upholding God's law, but yet they are breaking God's law. And then you have this discussion taking place with Judas. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned, and that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou to that. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple, and departed and went and hanged himself. So here we have the difference between worldly sorrow and godly sorrow. That's spoken of in 2 Corinthians 7:10. That though it says that he repented, and that he's even willing to confess the sin that he had committed. I have sinned, what have you done? In that I have betrayed the innocent blood. And yet the response that he has is to go out and hang himself. That with Judas, in not fully comprehending and listening to what Jesus was presenting, that yes, he's going to die, but he's going to rise again, and that even with what was mentioned in the Lord's Supper, if he had stayed for that, that in Christ's blood is the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. That all of this is happening so that sins can be forgiven, including this sin. But when we get into a position to where we start thinking, oh no, what I'm going through is way different than what anybody else has ever gone through. that there's no way that God could forgive me for what I've done here. We're setting ourselves up for failure. And people do that. They look for pity, trying to play the victim mentality. And then they don't change. If they do change, it's not a genuine change in that, even to this degree. They just feel the need to give up. For Judas, in his mind, there's no way out, there's no way of escape. And there's no wonder that he felt this way when you consider who it is that he's going to and that's answering this way to him. The priest and the high priest at this time are the people who stand between God and man to offer sacrifices for sins of the people, so that God will pass over, He will roll over to their account to the one sacrifice that's going to be able to truly justify. Here he is going to these men that are supposed to help him, and what's the response that he gets? We're not going to help you. Oh, I've sinned. And ultimately the response is, I don't care.
Now with that, they're supposed to make a sacrifice for him,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In this case, if that doesn't happen, what happens to Judas if he didn't hang himself? And this is before Jesus was even in the picture. What would happen would he ever be forgiven because somebody's not doing that? And is he held guilty forever, or is it because he's coming and he's admitting and he's sorrowful, he's repenting, all this stuff? What would have happened to somebody back in the day, not Judas, but somebody, or I guess, Judas, but before all this happened?
Mm-hmm. Well, in this situation, it would be the same type of thing with the paralytic man in Matthew 9, and even with the thief on the cross. That with Matthew 9, Jesus forgives a man's sin without sacrifice. And with the thief on the cross, he forgives sins without sacrifice. So if Judas would have just stuck it out until Jesus had resurrected, he could have been forgiven. In which even in this, he still could have been forgiven. And so right here we have, again, the problem with the Pharisees that's described in Matthew 23. They sit in Moses' seat. They're the one calling the shots. They don't get to make these kind of calls. They don't get to decide who has their sins forgiven and who doesn't. This man is coming in, I've done this, I'm needing forgiveness. And then they say, no, we're not forgiving you. Well, number one, you're not the one that forgives. God is the one that forgives. And so even there again, that's what Jesus is trying to teach, and that what he's trying to show with his ministry that he was doing on earth. That he, in fact, is God. He has the ability to forgive sins. So at this time, Judas should have been looking past this to what was being taught. But there again, we have been taught to us. You can hear all the teaching and never hold on to any of it. Judas walked with Jesus for 3 years, and to a large degree, he would have been hearing the same thing that the other apostles are hearing. But it's just not sticking. It's not coming in, and that because Judas is one of these that's not converted. He's still very much a thief. He's not in it for the right reasons. And then when you find yourself in a time of trouble, you don't know what to do. So that's a good question when you're considering, so with this happening to Judas, we also can learn this isn't the only time that this happened. If this is how they're behaving towards Judas, more than likely they did this to other people too. So what about them? This is that falling into Matthew 13, I believe it is, in picking corn on the Sabbath day, where Jesus has to emphasize to them, God desires mercy over sacrifice. And that these people that would have been turned away by the ones that are supposed to be helping them, God's going to take care of them. And that even with that, it's not even a guarantee that the entire system was corrupted. That more than likely, though he's going into the temple and he's dealing with the chief priests here, the ones that are involved in this trial, he probably could have found somebody, another priest, that would have done this for him. But it's just it's just the thing of when you're going through it and you're constantly running into walls and you're running into hurdles and you're not trying to get over them or find some other way, you lay down and give up, is when you put yourself into trouble. And that's what Judas decided to do. Instead of it, like, okay, I got this answer here, but I'm not going to let that stop me.
Now, these are the people that he got the silver
Right.
from, right?
Yeah.
So, do you think it would be a guilty, I have to make it right with these guys, and it's like, hey, we're kind of all in the same lump, and they know it, and it's like, we're not doing anything. It's like, but no, we're together.
Yeah.
And it's that, like, betrayal right there. It's that realization that...
Yeah, so that's a good point, in that if they were to recognize or they were to admit to this, okay, yeah, we'll help you with this, then they just incriminated themselves. Exactly. So they can't allow that.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, that's nothing to us. And so right there just shows there's no honor among thieves.
Yeah.
Here are the people that you have joined yourself to, and it's like, oh, we're all on the same team. They'll back me up. They'll take care of me. Here he comes, and what do?
They betray him.
They betray him. What do you think was going to happen? Thus, it just goes to show with this class of people, though they claim to be religious, you cannot throw your hat in with them and expect justice. It's what Jesus said, you don't cast your pearl before swine. Because what will they do?
Trample them under their feet.
And?
Turn into
Okay, they'll turn and tear you up. And that's what's happening here. Judas is going to this class of people with a righteous attempt. Hey, I have sinned. I want to be forgiven. You don't go to this class of people. Even though they're in the position that they're in, you don't go to them, because they'll turn around and bite you. There's people like that today. People just like this inside the Lord's church. Under the disguise of righteousness and piety. But they just can't be trusted because of how they behave. And it's not to say that they can't change. Anybody can change. You just have to want to. But it all comes down to like this admittance part of it. Judas is willing to admit it. These guys aren't. And that because they're not wanting to give up their position. They don't want to lose their spot. They're in charge. They've got the power. They've got the influence. And that's gone to their head to where it's like, well, we're not even going to do what we're supposed to be doing, which is help reconcile people back to God. So yeah, good questions, good thoughts. Anything else? All right. And so like this right here is all you need to know about Israel at this time. But as we said, the same thing's happening in the church today. The same mentality, not caring about sin. I've sinned, or there is sin. What's that to us? You go deal with it. As we said with Sandpoint, hey, there's sin. We need to talk to you about it. What's that to us? You go deal with it. The folks down the street here, hey, there's sin that's coming in. We need to talk about it. What's that to us? Throughout our brotherhood, there's just a lack of concern. There's a lack of care when it comes to sin. They just do not care. Well, we won't talk about it. It'll go away. No, it won't. The Bible says that sin is like leaven. It spreads. You let it stay, it's going to grow. So that right there is man's wisdom, Pharisee type mentality. Okay, we need to address this. No, we're not going to. So you're smarter than God now? God says to handle it. You're saying, no, we're not going to handle it. Sandpoint, these brethren down the road, and then our other brother in Idaho that has sinned as well, and that we've gotten no response. Well, you stay on your side of the fence, I'll stay on mine. Is his mentality. That's this. Oh, there's sin, there's a problem, let's deal with it. What we see with Judas is what is presented many times by our brethren. This is the ultimate problem, this is the ultimate issue with sin. Sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. Sin promises so much, but it cannot deliver. And in Judas is seen the end of a self-centered life. The Bible tells us he was a thief. Only concerned about himself. When he went to the high priest to get the money, that was the question. What can you give me? He's not thinking about anybody else. He's thinking about himself. And he ends up hanging himself. A life of materialism and ignoring the spiritual things of life. And ultimately ignoring the possibility of forgiveness. That he would actually be able to move on from that. But moving further from this, which we're already seeing the religious hypocrisy from what they've just said, but now notice what they try to do. The chief priest took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful for to put them into the treasury because it is the price of blood." Just look at the inconsistency here. Seriously, it's not lawful? Now you want to care about the law? After we've just gone through a list of 14, 15 different things that you just did to break the law? Now you want to act all pious and holy? And oh, we gotta follow the rules here. But then they take it a step further. We can't put it into the treasury. And they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. It's a strange thing, the way people begin to think in being able to purify something that's sinful, and that through charity. A potter's field is where you bury strangers, those that don't have any place to be buried and they don't have any family to take care of their burial. So here's something that's sinful, and oh, we're not supposed to do anything with that, but we'll take it and we'll put it over here. Aren't they so good? Aren't they so benevolent? Aren't they so caring? No, they're not. Because it's hypocrisy. It's the same thing like people that will gamble, go to the casino, play the lottery, whatever, knowing that it's sinful, but then how they try to justify it, or how they try to cleanse what they're doing. Most of the time we don't hear this with brethren, but I've dealt with it with denominational people. Well, yeah, I know gambling's wrong, but if I win, I'm going to take some of that and I'm going to donate it towards the church. I'm going to put some of it in the plate. Now it's clean. Now it's good. No, it's still bad.
It's funny how they say, I'll take some of it. It's not like I'm going to put it all in there
Right.
because it's dirty money.
Right.
And it's like, no, why not? It wasn't yours to begin with. Why all of a sudden does it matter?
Right. The idea of, well, the ends will justify the means. Doesn't matter how I got it. It just all depends. It all matters on what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to do something good with it. No. It's not how we're supposed to operate. And if that's how you're going to operate, then you're always going to find yourself compromising and not standing strong and standing steadfast in the things that you're supposed to be steadfast. So here we have, again, picture to us, people that use good means to cover up evil and wicked attitudes and characteristics. We don't give the Pharisees a pass. Oh, but they're trying. They're doing something good here. No, they are rotten. And they are hell-bound. And we can see it with the Pharisees, but then we start playing this game with others.
Just going to say, and ultimately, it's everything that they're doing is sinful.
Mm-hmm.
Just every step that they're doing, even to the last part of, well, I'm just going to put it in the charity, that leading up to it is all sinful, and even that is just a smokescreen of what I just did. So everything's being deceitful. Even if it's a good cause, you're just being deceitful, and ultimately it's sinful.
Yeah. And you go back into the Old Testament, Isaiah specifically is what coming to my mind. And in Isaiah, he references the fact that because Israel has corrupted themselves so much that even their sacrifices stink before God. Now, normally, when the scriptures talk about a sacrifice going up to God, it's a sweet-smelling savor, something that's enjoyable. But because of how they were, but yet they're still going through the sacrifices, God says, "Nuh-uh, I don't accept that. That stuff stinks to me." Same thing right here. This doesn't please God. He sees it for what it is. So then verse 8, wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. So that's interesting also, that it doesn't seem like anybody's fooled by what's actually taking place here. They know this money was the purchase of innocent blood, and that even to the day it's being called the field of blood. We know how you got this money to buy this field. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord appointed me. You can also find connection to this in Zechariah 11, 12, and 13. But let's pause a moment and consider this potter's field that's being bought. It's referenced as being a potter's field because not only are we burying strangers, but it's also a field where pieces of pottery that are broken and unfit for use are cast aside. So the money of blood, or money for the blood of Christ, was used to buy this field of broken pottery. That's not good for really any other use. Now you just consider this in view of humanity. And just how coincidental that as the blood of Christ, or the money for the blood of Christ is buying this, and then the blood of Christ also bought us, and we were just like this broken pottery. We were marred by sin. Good for nothing, cast to the side. But then His blood is shed for us, to purchase us. And not just to purchase us, but to make us whole. And so when you are reading Jeremiah 18, where this reference is connected, or where this prophecy is being made, here's what you have being pictured. The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise, go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause thee to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in mine hand, O house of Israel. That though the pot or the work was marred in the hand, It had a blemish. It had a default. And yet the potter still had the ability to use that and make it into something else. And then God makes that connection to Israel. That, okay, you're marred. You're broken. But if that's what the potter can do to a piece of clay, then can I not do that to you? Certainly he can. If, and there's a big if we are in fact able to be worked on. Not sure if anybody has done any pottery work, but when you're involved in doing this, you've got to constantly be putting water onto the clay while it's there on the wheel. If you don't, it's going to dry up and you're not going to be able to mold it anymore. And it's going to dry up to the point if you start trying to do that, it's just going to break and crumble in your hand. And you have people that are like that. They're just dried up and crusty and they're not going to be moldable. They're not going to be mendable. They're not going to be flexible. God can't work with that. But if you're going to be clay on the wheel that is moldable and that is soft, then God can work with that. And how interesting that even in dealing with this illustration, you have water being a part of that. Though it's not directly mentioned. And as I said, anybody that does this kind of work knows, oh yeah, you've got to have water in the mix to have this work.
She's thinking the field paid of blood, that is the home of the people that died, but it's only paid for after, it's only your home after you're buried.
Right, yeah.
Paid for.
Yeah, you got to be buried in it.
By the blood.
Yeah. Sermon in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Write it up. So then going back to verse 11, 27, Jesus stood before the governor. They brought him before Pilate. And the governor asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? Jesus said unto him, Thou sayest. Now this is what Matthew has been setting out to prove this whole entire time. The king has come. He's here to establish his kingdom. And Jesus is also proving that he is the king that is set to die on a cross. Just as has been prophesied. And here we have, at this moment, as the questioning is taking place, and Jesus answers with confidence. Thou sayest. Jesus never doubted what he was going through at this time and what was about to happen. And then you consider how Luke records it in Luke chapter 23 and verse 1. The whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate, and they began to accuse him. So Luke gives us some more detail. And again, we're studying psychology here. How are people going to behave? What are the games they're going to play? Notice this. They led him in there, and they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ a king. Now, number one, there's a truth in here and there's a falsehood. The truth is here. Yes, Jesus did teach this. There's no denying that. He doesn't deny that before Pilate. Art thou king of the Jews? Thou sayest. But look at what they try to do. In misrepresenting his teaching and what he said, they connect his kingship with this, forbidding to give tribute to Caesar. Now, is that what he said? Is that what he taught publicly? No. He said very clearly, whose face is on the coin? They said Caesar's. He said, okay, you render to Caesar's what Caesar's. He never taught that. And in fact, he said, you pay the tax. But here is what people will do with the information that we give. And that they will try to build a false case off of a truth and in placing it with a false. Well, he said he was the king, he's Christ a king. Well, then automatically that would mean we need to stop paying Caesar. No, that's not what that means. But then, look at how quickly they shift gears after that is shot down. And after that is put down. Verse 4. Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. So your argument's fallen on his face. Pilate says, I find no fault. They were the more fierce, saying, he stirreth up the people, teaching them, or teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. You can always spot a complainer, because when you beat their original argument, they always have another in the chamber. Instead of just leaving it alone, and it's like, okay, yeah, we were wrong. No, they move on to something else. And here, they present just a flat-out lie. No truth in it at all. If he was stirring up the people into a revolt, into an insurrection, Pilate would have already heard about it. That kind of stuff doesn't stay quiet. So again, we know what you're saying isn't true. Because insurrections make noise. And they follow after certain standards and certain definitions. But here's what they're doing. And this is what people will do with us. Well, water baptism doesn't save. Well, 1 Peter 3:21 says that it does. Well, what about the indwelling of the Holy Spirit? That's just a complainer. You started here, shot it down, and instead of just admitting, okay, I was wrong, let me stop and let me listen, they go on to the next one. And nobody likes that kind of person. That person is extremely tiresome. Because they're never satisfied until they get their way. And that's all this is them trying to get their way with Pilate. Going back to Matthew 27:12, when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate unto him, hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? He answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly. There's no point in trying to answer because you know you're not going to get any justice. And that even with what Pilate is mentioning here, hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? Pilate knows their witnesses aren't true. And he's just wanting some type of response from this man. He doesn't get one. And that causes the governor to marvel greatly just at the steadfastness of this man. Doesn't start begging for mercy, doesn't start trying to find a way out. He just simply takes everything that's thrown at him. Then verse 15, now at the feast, the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner whom they would. And they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, whom will ye that I release unto you? Barabbas, or Jesus, which is called Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Now, 18. He's asking them this question, who would you have me deliver you? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. How did Pilate know that? How does Pilate know their motives? How is he able to judge their motives?
Because of their fruit that they're...
Because of the actions that are playing out in front of him.
Because the arguments that they're giving don't line up. They're lying, and he's the main guy, like you said. He would have heard, if something's going on, he would have heard about it. So nothing's adding up. Nothing's staying consistent. And the way that you find out what your motive is through actions that you produce.
Here are the Pharisees, chief priests, or actually the Sadducees are in charge at this time. So Caiaphas is a Sadducee. But here are the chief priests and the elders. And up to this point, they're the ones in charge. They're the ones that the people go to for guidance, for leadership, for help. Now Jesus comes on the scene, and he starts pulling the people away from them, and they start following him. And Pilate is wise enough to recognize what this is. This is just a petty struggle for power. All this is that you are losing attention. People don't want to listen to you. They want to listen to him. And you've brought up these trumped up charges, these fake charges, so as to get him out of the way so you guys can be in control again. We can judge motive. Because of a person's behavior. Proverbs 23:7, we're told, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he." Well, how do I know how a person is in their heart, in their mind, as they think? Because they will behave as they think. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Who knows the spirit of a man except for the spirit that's within him? But when that spirit, when that mind becomes vocalized, it becomes revealed. Oh, now I know what's going on the inside. I can know what your thoughts are by how you act. And that's what's playing out here. So here's Pilate, a Roman, a heathen. And from what we know from the trial of Jesus, he's not a good man. He's corrupt. He lacks integrity. But even he knows what's up. And we're supposed to be wiser as the children of light. And I can't do this? Certainly I can. In Proverbs 26:24, we're told, "He that dissembleth with his lips and layeth up deceit within him, when he speaketh fair, believe him not. For there are 7 abominations in his heart, whose hatred is covered by deceit." But notice this, "His wickedness shall be showed before the whole congregation." He that hateth. How do I know that a person hates? Here's the action. Here's what he does. Dissembleth with his lips. The word dissembleth means to give a false or misleading appearance. To conceal the truth or real nature. To feign. They're not being real. They're not being genuine. He dissembleth with his lips and layeth up deceit within him. When he speaketh fair, Believe him not. Don't be a pushover. We are not supposed to believe everything that a person says. And especially if I know that this is how they are. They are simply trying to conceal one's true motives and thoughts by some pretense. They are speaking or acting hypocritically. But the proverb writer tells us, his wickedness shall be showed. It comes out eventually. Because this is who they really are. And that before the whole congregation. The reference here to 7 abominations in his heart goes back to Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19. There are these 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, and a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that are swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. These are the kind of actions that come from a heart that has hate in it. Devises wicked imaginations. You're making up things that aren't there. You're evil surmising. Just thinking the worst of what's going on. And because of those imaginations, you have feet that are swift in running to mischief. You got to go tell somebody. That produces a false witness, speaking lies. That sows discord among the brethren, brings about division. And that God hates this kind of stuff. How do I know that this is the motive of some person? Look at how they're behaving. It's laid out for us. And then the fact that our entire study in the book of Matthew has been all about having the right motives, having the right attitude with what we're doing. And that as we are going through, we can start viewing people and we can start recognizing, you know what, they act a certain way when they're in a certain situation. But then they act differently over here. That's an impure motive. And now you see it with the Pharisees, Sadducees, chief priest. Oh yeah, when everybody's watching, we'll pray. We'll give alms. But then what about when nobody's around? When I'm over here and I think that I'm in secret. And here's what's going on. This is who they really are. Not who they present when others can see. And in Mark 15, beginning in verse 6, we have this description that's given to us about Barabbas. Now at that feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answered them, saying, Will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. But the chief priests moved the people that he should rather release Barabbas unto them. Now just look at this. You remember what the charges were they brought up against Jesus? Oh, he's stirring up the people. He says he's the king and that you shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar. He's stirring up the people. He's starting up an insurrection. All of that's false. But then look at the person that they're actually wanting to have delivered to them. He actually did the very thing that they're trying to charge Jesus with. Saying, oh, this man needs to be punished. Oh, but this guy that actually did this stuff, let's let him go. Hypocrites. You read throughout the Proverbs, it talks about an unjust weight is an abomination before the Lord. Now what that's talking about is as you're in the market and you're trying to buy things by weight, okay, your scales have to be balanced so that you're actually getting the amount that you're paying for. And that if you're going to try to cheat somebody doing that, the Bible says very clearly that's an abomination. But this right here applies into that same principle of a just weight or a just measurement. If you're going to condemn Jesus for insurrection, then what about Barabbas? Well, if you're going to be just and you're going to be consistent, don't let go Barabbas because he's guilty of the same thing. That right there should show before all what's really going on here.
Oh, no.
Okay.
The releasing of the prisoner, is that a Jewish tradition or is that under the Roman law?
Yeah, it's merely by Pilate. Yeah, that's just something that Pilate set up for them to do, so at kind of an attempt to kind of keep the peace.
So it wasn't regular practice, it was just like an exception.
Do what now?
It wasn't a regular practice to do that every year, it was just an exception.
Oh no, for Pilate, yeah, he did this. Now at that feast, he released unto them one prisoner. This is an established practice by Pilate, that he would do this. Now as far as to the kind of person that he would release to them, that was simply by their request, as is being shown in this. That here's who's in there, and the multitude cried aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. So here's the practice again. He's been doing this. And he said, I'll release unto you the king of the Jews. And the priest said, no, you give us Barabbas. So again, when we find this kind of behavior being done, and we have this kind of behavior going on right now. Oh, Micah, Reese, Jordan, we don't like the way you say stuff. And then they want to try to pin us down with a certain crime that's being committed. But then somebody else turns around and does not even the exact same thing, does something worse than what we're supposedly doing. And he wants to be let go. That's an unjust balance. That's hypocrisy. And that's an abomination before God. If we're bad because of how we say and do stuff, then this other person is condemned with us. No ifs, ands, buts about it. There's no way to explain it. And the fact that we have some brethren that are hemming and hawing over that shows that somebody's not getting a fair shake. That somebody is not being held to the same standard. And then you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why are these ones being persecuted and this one's being let go? There's something behind it. And these are all the signs. And that's why we have this stuff laid out for us. That's why we have this stuff written down for us. There's application in this. that when people are not being held to the same standard, there's some type of favoritism being shown, or there's some ulterior motive at play. Well, why is it bad over here, but it's not bad over here? And it's that kind of attitude that ends up having the innocent people getting hurt. You end up punishing the wrong person, and you let the wicked person go. So with all of this, it just further cements what Pilate saw. Yeah, I see what's at play here. You guys are not consistent on anything. You're condemning Jesus for an insurrectionist, but you're letting a real insurrectionist go. You guys are just rotten. And it shows even further. The chief priests, they just really do not care. So not only just insurrection, but he committed murder in the insurrection. Jesus hasn't killed anybody. But then you go over to Luke 23:13, and we'll close with this. Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, they said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. You go back to Matthew 27:21. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether the twain will ye that I release unto you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate saith unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Pilate was a man that was being led by political thinking. If I can't keep the peace and a tumult rises up, then I'm going to be seen as a bad leader and somebody's going to come in and take my spot. In this scene is the culmination of what the children of Israel said long ago, all the way back in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. And here's what you get. There is no justice here.
Now the mere fact that Pilate said, hey, I'll wash my hands,
Yeah.
I'm clean, does that make him clean of what just happened? Because he had the chance to let Jesus go, but there was going to be turmoil over here.
Yep.
Or if he doesn't do what the multitude says, then he's going to be judged by them, and he might get the chance to have his head get cut off or whatever, get
Yep.
crucified. Or if he does this, then it's like, okay, well, my actions, I'm just showing that I'm innocent and my hands are clean. It's all on you guys.
Everybody's passing blame.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pilate can't do that. You're the one in charge. The buck stops with you. And there again, when we're thinking about this, what should Pilate have done? Pilate should have let Jesus go, and if the Jews started causing trouble, squash them. You don't pervert justice so as to keep peace. That's not peace. That's not the definition of a peacemaker. A peacemaker does not ignore what the right thing to do is. That way, there's no unrest. Because that's not peace. All you've done is let the evil people have their way.
I was going to say they're under Roman bondage anyways.
Yeah.
What could the Jews have done?
Well, considering the fact that, so you got to remember, we're during the time of Passover, which means there are Jews from all over in Jerusalem at this time. Pilate is outnumbered, like big time.
Okay.
So I'm sure that that's coming into play here. That he's looking at it and it's like, okay, I don't have the forces. But that doesn't matter. Like you said, even if it ends up costing him his life, yeah, they do revolt and I end up dying in this. You did the right thing. But a lot of times people are too afraid to make that kind of sacrifice for what's right. So yeah, there are some good things about Pilate, but I mean, he saw the justness of this man. He's innocent, so on and so forth. But way down deep, Pilate is weak. He's a coward. And he showed it. Well, I wash my hands of it. You do it. No, no, no. You're still going to be held accountable. And that what you have here is Pilate trying to please everyone. And this is the kind of trouble you're going to get into by trying to do that. It is impossible to please everyone. So what should we be concerned with? Or better yet, better question, who should we be concerned about pleasing?
God.
Is God. And as long as I'm pleasing to Him, I don't care who else is mad. And it's that kind of mindset that's going to help us to gauge and be steadfast no matter what ends up coming. All right. Stop there. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
My last thing is, Pilate is trying to please everyone as he's hanging someone on a cross.
Yep. Yeah, what about that man?
Yeah.
And again, that's just selfishness. Just all there is to it is just flat out selfishness. I don't want to lose my seat. I don't want to lose my position. I don't want to lose my head. Whatever. And the innocent suffer. And that's the one you should be thinking about. So yeah, good point there. Okay, nothing else? And we'll stop.